It's time now for the latest news on what's hot and what's not in the world of technology with Mathew Dickerson on Tech Talk. Here on TCFM 88.9.
Morning, Matthew. How are you?
I'm early because I've got nothing better to do, Richard, than sit around the home and wait to have a chat to you.
Oh, no, you're locked in. You're locked down, and it's tragic, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we're getting there. At least I've got my technology to play with. That's the one shining light through all of this.
Indeed it is. Mate, if you're struggling to remember your password, I've got my hand up. Microsoft wants you to ditch it. What's all this about? I think it'd be a wonderful idea.
How can they possibly be serious about this? Get rid of the password. We know that passwords are a problem, and people certainly have this terrible habit of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or the word password as their password. So Microsoft have said, we've tried for years to get people to be a bit better with their passwords, so we're just going to give up altogether and say, let's get rid of it, which makes no sense at all. But the way you do it is via an authenticator app. Now, this isn't two-factor authentication. This isn't something where you put a password in and then you also have some sort of authentication app. If you were using this passwordless process, you would put in your details in terms of logging in, and then you'd say, send me the code. It would send the code to your authenticator app on your phone, and then you'd type in that code. If you don't want to use the authenticator app, you can use a secondary email address or some sort of biometric process, i.e. fingerprint or iris or facial recognition. But keep in mind, these aren't the secondary processes behind a password. The idea here is to get rid of passwords altogether. Some of the data Microsoft had to base around this was 579 password attacks are made every second across the world. So getting rid of passwords is a really good idea. But you've got to have a fair bit of confidence in what they're doing and the way they're going forward. So it's a bit scary.
I mean, sometimes already, I go to my bank and my bank sends me a code on my phone that I have to type in every time so I can get into my account.
Yeah, that's right. So that's called two-factor authentication. So you type in a password first, and then you'll get the second factor being the text that comes through. What Microsoft is talking about is not doing the first step, not having the password in the first place, just sending you the information for you to then type in, and that's the only security you would have.
There's sense in it, but you're still mucking around though, aren't you?
Yeah, and we used to have some funny stories where people would tell us before Wi-Fi texting came in, they'd be using a satellite connection out on a farm somewhere, they'd be doing their banking as you just described a second ago, but when the text was sent to them, they'd have to run up the driveway 50 metres or 100 metres to get some mobile phone reception, get the text, run back down and put it in before the timer timed out to say that they took too long to do it. So you can imagine in the middle of winter running out in their pyjamas trying to do that at night time.
There's always something as a problem, isn't there?
Yeah.
Now, this next story I love, a built-in phone charger. Phone chargers are my bane. They're everywhere, and I think, I've got to charge the phone. Where's the charger? Have I got it in the bedroom plugged in? Have I got it in the kitchen plugged in, the living room, wherever? And a pain in the butt. So tell me, what are we going to do with built-in phone chargers?
Well, you've been able to buy some furniture for a little while where you could buy a new desk or some new shelving, for example, or a bookshelf that's got some built-in chargers, some wireless chargers. So you can just sit your phone down and it starts charging. But lots of people don't want to replace their desk or their bookshelves. So now there's a new charger that's come out that allows you to stick the charger underneath the desk and it will give you wireless charging on top. Now, some people might think, well, there's already wireless chargers. I could just stick one underneath at the moment. But those wireless chargers are designed to have the device sitting directly on top of the actual wireless charger.
Which is what I'm doing at the moment, yeah.
And there you go. So if it was, say, 20 millimetres away underneath the desk, it wouldn't actually allow the charging to go through. So the idea here is that they've designed this charger specifically not to be sensitive to charging directly on top of it, but to be between 8 and 23 millimetres above the actual charging pad. So if you stick it underneath a desk, assuming your desk is anywhere between 8 and 23 millimetres, then what it will do is actually send that signal a little bit up above the charger so you can just sit your device on top of the desk, have the charger stuck underneath the desk and the thickness of the desk in between, provided the desk isn't made of metal, then that will actually charge on top. So I think that's a great idea.
I was going to say, if it's a metal desk, it wouldn't work. And the other thing about it is these chargers, I've got one here, that sits on top of the turntable, as a matter of fact. That's how often we use turntables in this joint. But anyway, it takes forever to charge. It's very, very slow.
They are slower. So these chargers are 5-watt chargers. Most phones now, most modern phones that you actually physically plug a cable into are 20-watt chargers. So they are certainly slower. But at the same time, if you're just sitting at your desk working away and you just sit your phone on the desk, you're probably not that worried about how fast it charges. It's just keeping the charge topped up.
Oh, that's what I do here with this one that sits on top of the turntable. Okay, now, guns that fire around corners. What's all this about?
This actually involves a company that you may be familiar with, Richard, Elbit Systems. You may remember they actually won the contract at one stage to provide the flight simulator out for the Royal Flying Doctor Service in Dubbo. So that was an $18 million training facility. But in the end, because they're so involved, this particular company, with developing weapons and assault rifle and combat systems, they actually, I don't know if it was directly as a part of that, but they actually end up being changed, and so they aren't providing the flight simulator out there at the Royal Flying Doctor Service anymore. But the latest thing they've come up with is something that just sounds like so incredible that it has to be from a video game, and it is really made to emulate a video game. It's an add-on to an assault rifle. So you clip it onto, say, an M4 assault rifle. And what it does, it gives you a whole range of information into a eye socket or an eye patch that you put over one of your eyes. And so rather than look down a sight on the actual gun itself, it gives you all this augmented reality. So I could look out across a field, I could see a target that I was aiming for, and I would know that they were 228 metres away. I'd know that the wind was 5 kilometres an hour from the left-hand side, so I need to aim 3 centimetres to the left of where I want to hit the target. It gives you all this information fed into your eye or directly to your eye, in front of your eye. It gives you information about whether the person you're targeting is a foe or a friend. So it uses a whole range of AI to get that, and you'd want to hope they got that part right. And the shooting around corner part, you could actually sit there and rather than like in the movies where some bad guy jumps out from behind around the corner and takes a quick shot and jumps back into somewhere hiding, you could actually have the gun facing around the corner while you were hidden behind the corner, because you can see what the gun can see rather than having to be directly behind the gun. So all this information is fed to you. It sounds just like a computer that's really strapped onto the gun to feed all this information to you. All the different people on your team, if you want to call it a team, are all being able to communicate with each other via these. So you get a build-up in your vision of all the other people that are on your side and where they are. So it's just all this extra information fed through to you. It'll tell you how many bullets are left in the magazines and all the people on your team. And it's really just this whole process of giving you more information to then make decisions based on that.
I'll tell you what. If you were doing it with paintball, you'd lose.
Yeah, and that's the only sad part about this. The technology, when you look at the technology in here, it's absolutely fantastic, but we're using it to harm other people, which doesn't feel that comfortable from my perspective. But maybe with a paintball game, that would be a much nicer way to go about it.
Yeah, I suppose so. Okay, finally, a high-speed internet. A 400-kilometre round trip to get this high-speed internet organised if you didn't have it. And how did they solve that problem? Yeah,
Project Loon was a project that Alphabet, the parent company of Google, had been working on to try and get some internet access to some remote locations. And they were using helium balloons, they were using solar-powered planes and solar-powered drones. And in the end, they shut down Project Loon. They basically gave up on it. But one of the things they got from Project Loon was this ability to send high-speed internet using lasers. And so they've actually started to use this on the ground now. In this particular example, they've got the situation in the Congo. They've got this raging river between two towns, and they can't lay an underwater cable across the river because it's just flowing too fast. They'd have to bury it too deep. It'd be too expensive to do it. So the cables at the moment to get internet connection between these two particular towns would go, as you said, around a 400-kilometre round trip. But using some of the technology they developed for Project Loon, they've got a laser that can send internet signal from one point to another. So they've set up two of these lasers. It's only 5 kilometres apart as the crow flies, and they're sending signals through at 20 gigabits per second via lasers. They've been testing it for the last 20 days. They've sent 700 terabytes of data. So even though Project Loon was not a disaster, but they gave up on Project Loon, some of the things they learn from Project Learn, they'll still be able to use that technology to try and deliver internet access into some of these remote areas. And having this wireless point-to-point communication, which is possible now, but much slower than that, having wireless communication at things like 20 gigabits per second will allow them to spread that internet around much better.
I tell you what, there are people listening here who probably saying, why don't you do using Dubbo?
That's right. Now, remember that 20 gigabits per second is not what the end user would experience. That's the backhaul that would be used to provide the, if you like, the main trunk, and then you would actually flow down to lower speeds to individuals. But at the moment, these particular two locations were joined by cables that had to run a lot longer distance and were a lot slower in terms of that backhaul speed.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. Good stuff. Matthew, always good talking to you with Tech Talk. We'll catch up next Wednesday morning. One day, very, very soon, we'll be able to do it in the studio together again. Woo-hoo. But in the meantime, we'll persevere with the phone, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday morning.
Thanks, Richard.